Hi, so in this video we're going to be looking at the Edexcel paper from 2018. It's the June series of exams. This particular one is paper 1, it's the non-calculator, and the plan is, like before, is I'm going to work through the first 20-25 minutes or so. Please do have a go at each of the questions, stop the video and then compare your solutions. Okay, so let's move on then to question number 1, which, like a lot of the Edexcel papers, is just fractions. They seem to favour putting fractions right at the very beginning of the papers. Okay, there's a couple of different ways of doing this. For me personally, I tend to add the indices, so I add the whole numbers before I add the fractions, because basically I can add 2 plus 1 and I can write that as 3 1/7 plus a quarter. And then really it's a case of making sure that both of the denominators have got the same value. So I can change that to both of them over 28. Okay, because 7 times 4 is 28. Now 7 goes into 28 4 times, so that's going to be 4 at the top there, and 4 goes into that 7 times. So the answer to this particular question will be 3 and 11/28, and that will give the solution. Now if you want to, you can leave that as a mixed as an improper fraction rather, so it will work out as 95/28, and people will get that solution, particularly if you don't add the indices and you make both of those improper fractions. Okay, let's move on then to question number 2, and that's work out 1 1/5 divided by 3/4. Well, in this particular one, you may remember that when you divide fractions, you need to multiply and flip them over. So if I write the first one as improper fraction, I'm going to get 6/5, and then I'm going to multiply that by 4/3. Now there's again a couple of ways you could do this. You can either say 6 times 4 is 24 and 5 times 3 is 15 and then reduce that down. I don't personally, I tend to do the reduction first, because what I can do is I can make that 1 and make that 2, because 3 will go into 3 once and 3 will go in 6 twice. So I can now rewrite that as 8/5, and that's just 1 3/8, and that would be the answer for this particular question. Okay, hope that's all right for you. Let's move on then to question number 2, and question number 2 we're looking at ratios. So this particular one talks about number of houses, number of flats are in a particular ratio, and number of flats and number of bungalows are in a different ratio. So let's have a look at that. So if we've got houses to flats, let's just write that out as houses to flats, and that's going to be 7/4. Okay, and then flats to bungalows, well, that's going to be 8/5. Okay, so the problem you've got there is that both of these numbers are different, so you need to make them the same. And the way I'm going to do that is I'm going to multiply this ratio by 2. It still is the same ratio, but I could write that as 14/8. So I'm multiplying both sides there by 2. Now if that is the case, it means then the number of flats is the same. So therefore I can write houses, flats to bungalows as houses, flats, bungalows, 14/8/5. Okay, nothing's changed, it's just the way, it just makes my life a little bit easier to write it out like that. Now the part of the question says that there are 50 bungalows in the village. Well, what that means is that the bungalows have been multiplied by 10, so there's actually 50 of them. But of course, if you multiply the bungalows by 10, then you've got to multiply the flats and the houses. Okay, so that's going to be 80 flats, and that's going to be 140 houses. So how many houses are there in the village? Well, there's actually 140 houses. Okay, and that will answer this particular question. Okay, so let's move on then to question number 3. As I mentioned before, please do stop the video, have a go at these questions for yourself, and see if you can come up with a solution that works for you. Okay, so Renee buys 5 kilograms of sweets to sell. She pays £10. Okay, she puts all the sweets into bags, blah, blah, and so it goes on. Okay, well, if she's got 250 grams of sweets in each bag, what we need to do really initially is find out how many bags of sweets she's actually going to create. So if she's got 5 kilograms of sweets, that's actually the same as saying 5,000 grams. So remember, with a lot of these is you need to make sure that your units are the same. And again, it's very much a favourite question with Edexcel and with AQA, is that they do tend to change the units around a little bit, and you will need to do some conversion. So there's 250 grams worth of sweets out of 5,000 altogether. And if we divide 5,000 by 250, then we can work out the number of bags of sweets that we've actually got. Now again, you might do it slightly differently than me. I personally would tend to reduce this down to a more manageable fraction. So the first thing I can do is I can divide top and bottom by 10, and that effectively knocks off the zeros. And then actually 25 into 500 is relatively easy, because 25 into 50 is twice, so that's going to give me 20. So actually she's going to have 20 bags of sweets. Okay, now each bag of sweets she's going to sell for 65 pence. Okay, so again, be very careful here, because again, they've been a little bit sneaky where they've got 65 pence and then £10. So you've got to make sure you're using the same units. Now, because it's easier to multiply by pence, what I'm going to do is I'm going to work out 65 times 20, and that's going to tell me the amount of money she actually sold all of the sweets for. Okay, now again, you might be slightly different in the way that you do things. I'm just going to put zeros in there, because 0 times 5 is 0, 0 times 6 is 0. I know some people don't do that. Personally, I prefer to, because it just keeps all of my numbers in the correct order. So again, I'm now multiplying by the 2, so I'm going to put a 0 in the units column. 2 times 5 is 10, 1 to carry, 2 times 6 is 12, plus 1 is 13. So actually, we've got now 1,300 pence. Okay, well, 1,300 pence is exactly the same as saying £13. Okay, so she bought the sweets for £10, and then she sold them for £13. Okay, so she bought or buys for £10, sells for £13. Okay, so her profit is going to be £3. Okay, and we've been asked to work out the percentage profit. Okay, well, the percentage profit is going to be the amount of profit she makes over the original. Okay, so it's 3 out of 10, and that's going to be the fraction. If we want to make that into a percentage, we just need to multiply that by 100, and that's going to give us 30% profit. Okay, so that's the amount of profit that she makes when she sells these sweets. Okay, hopefully that's okay for you, and you're able to keep track with these particular questions. Okay, so we're going to move on now to question number 4. We're about 8 minutes into the video. I'm going to keep this going for about another 10 or 15 minutes or so. Okay, let's move on then to question number 4. This is one where it's very, very easy to miss the main word here. And the main word that you've got is estimate. Okay, what they're not asking you to do is to do a whole load of calculations that are really tedious and very difficult. So what we mean by estimate is that normally we can write things to one significant figure. So a cycle race across America is 3,069.25 miles in length. Well, actually, to one significant figure, it's as close as we need to get when we're estimating. We can actually say that that's 3,000 miles in length. Okay, and then Juan I don't know how to pronounce that. I think it's Juan, knows his average speed for the previous races is, well, it's not 15.12. I'm going to write that actually as 15 because I know 15 and 3,000 are going to be relatively easy to divide if I need to do that. Okay, for the next race across America, you cycle for 8 hours per day. That's fine for me. Estimate how many days Juan will take to complete the race. Okay, so let's look first at the amount of distance that he needs to travel. So his average speed is going to be 15, and the time it's going to take him is going to be 8 hours per day. Okay, so let's have a look at that. So in a particular day, he's going to have speed equals distance divided by time. His speed is going to be 15. Distance we don't know, but we do know the time is going to be 8. So if we want to work out the distance, we multiply 15 times 8 and we're going to get a distance of 120. So for every day, he's going to cycle 120 miles. Seems like really hard work to me, but every day is going to do 120 miles. Okay, so if we want to work out how many days one will take to complete the race, we've got to basically divide 3,000 by 120. Now again, you might do this slightly differently. I tend to prefer to work in fractions if I can, because it just helps me to visualize what's going on. So 3,000 divided by 120. Well, firstly, I can divide top and bottom by 10. And then I've actually got 300 divided by 12. If I want, then I could divide through by 2, but actually it's pretty easy, I think, to divide through by 3, because what I end up with is going to be, if I divide by 3, I'm going to end up with 100 at the top, and I'm going to end up dividing by 3 with 4 at the bottom. And 100 divided by 4 is actually going to be 25 days. Okay, and that would answer this particular question. Okay, so let's move on to part B of the question, and it says that one trains for the race. The average speed he can cycle at increases, and it's now actually 16.27 miles per hour. How will this affect your answer? Well, you could work this out and give some examples if you wanted to, but I think what they're after is actually saying that because he's cycling faster, he's going to take less time to complete the race. Okay, so we could just write something in there along the lines of he will take less time to complete the race as cycling faster. Okay, and that's absolutely fine if you want to write something like that. Okay, let's move on then to question number 5. And question number 5, we've got one of those initial questions, which is sometimes they're quite difficult to actually visualize these things, but what you've got to imagine is that you're looking at, you're about the size of a little kind of ant or something, or a spider. Okay, spiders got 8 legs, haven't they? So there's a little spider, okay, and he's looking across at this what looks like a massive great pyramid. So if it's a massive great pyramid, what's it going to look like to him? Well, it's going to look like it's got 6 centimeters along the bottom, and then actually it's going to be 4 centimeters tall. Okay, so he doesn't realize that it's sloping away from him. It just really looks like a very large triangle, and that large triangle is going to be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and then 4 along the top there. And apologies for my writing and my drawing really, but that would be what the little ant would see when he looks. Okay. Part B of the question is then where it asks you to work out the total surface area of the pyramid. Okay, now without actually referring back to the sketch itself, otherwise I'm going to be moving papers around too much. What I'm going to do is I'll just write out the solution, talk you through it, then hopefully you'll be able to work through the actual paper and the question itself by referring back to the diagram. Okay, so if we look at each side, well, as we've mentioned, each side is a triangle, and the way to work out the area of a triangle is going to be a half base times height. You might write base times height divided by 2, whichever, it doesn't really matter. But in my particular case, I just remember it as a half base times height, and we've said that the base is 6. Now, the height itself is going to be a slant height. So that's slightly different from the way that you drew it. You drew it as a perpendicular height, but actually the slant height, if you go back to the diagram, is going to be 5, okay? So 6 times 5 is 30, and a half of 30 is going to be 15. So we know that each of the triangles is going to be 15 centimeters squared. Okay, then of course we've got to remember the base as well. So what we've got is the base, which it's a square base pyramid. So we can just work that out as 6 times 6, which is 36. Okay, so we've got enough information now to be able to calculate the total surface area. So the total is going to be 36, which is the base, plus 4 lots of 15, okay? And if you work that out, that's going to give you 96 centimeters squared in total. Okay, hope that's all right. Let's move on then to question number 6. Okay, so moving fairly rapidly through these now, but hopefully you're able to keep pace with what we're working through. Okay, so a pattern is made from 4 identical squares, and this is your key point with here, is that I've seen a few students attempt this particular question. It's been quite tricky for them, but the word that you need to kind of identify with, or at least focus on, is going to be this, squares. So it means then that each of these has the same side length. Well, that's going to allow us actually to work out the coordinates of point C, which is what they're looking for. Okay, so the first thing I would do is I would say, well, actually, the x value along here is going to be 6, okay, because point A is 6, 7. The x value at point B is going to be 38. So the difference between 38 and 6 is actually, let me just work that out. So 38 minus 6 is going to be 32. Okay, now if there's 32 and it's squares, then each of these must be exactly the same. And there's 32 difference between the two. So therefore, each of these will be a side length of 8. Okay. So hopefully you can see that now we're in a position to at least work out the x coordinate of C, which is going to be 6 plus 2 lots of 8, which is going to be 6 plus 16, so that's going to give us an x coordinate of 22. Okay, now where it can fall down a little bit with this is that you've got to be a little bit careful now that we make sure that we do exactly the same exercise because they are squares. So therefore, on the y coordinate, we're going to start with 36 because that's the y coordinate here. So this point along here is going to be 36. And then actually we're going to come down 2 lots of 8. So first lot of 8, second lot of 8, which means it's going to be 36, take away 16. And if we take away 16, it means that point would be 20. So therefore, the coordinates of C are going to be x equals 22 and y equals 20. So we can write that into the solution right at the very bottom here, 22 and 20. Okay, hopefully you got that one all right. It is a little bit tricky to kind of work through. Okay, particularly I think working out the y coordinates. Okay, let's move on. Finally then, we're going to move on to question number 7. And this is where we've got one of these reflections, rotation type things, which are proving to be very popular actually, I think, with a lot of the Edexcel papers. Okay, so it says shape T is reflecting the line x equals minus 1 to give shape R. So the first thing that we've got to do is we've got to identify where x equals minus 1 is. Okay, now just please be very careful about these sorts of things, particularly because there's a lot of words on this particular question. So we need to just take it a little bit of a time. And the first thing we're going to do is we're going to look at this point here. Okay, so we need to find shape R. Well, x is -1 when all the coordinates of x are -1. So at this particular point, this is x is -1, y is 2. This particular point, x is -1, y is 4. Or x is -1, y is -2. So at that point, all of the coordinates for x are going to be -1. So this is the line x equals -1. Okay, I'll just write that at the top here for you. So x equals -1. And what we're doing is we're reflecting shape T in that line. So you've got to imagine it's a mirror. Okay, and if we put that mirror there, what will T look like, if you like, behind the mirror? What it will do is it'll take this point here, which is 2 jumps away from x equals -1, and take that point and move it 2 jumps behind. Okay, similarly with this one, which is 4 jumps away, it's going to be 1, 2, 3, 4. I'm going to move it back 4, so 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, similarly this one, this is 3 jumps away, 1, 2, 3, and then 1, 2, 3. And I think with a lot of these type of questions, it's actually better to do it by their vertices, by the corners of the shape, rather than trying to imagine it. It's better to do it corner to corner to corner to make sure that you get a clear drawing. Sometimes I think it is quite easy to actually estimate where these drawings are going to be. Particularly triangles okay, but sometimes they can be a little bit more complex than this. Okay, so then it says shape R, which we've just drawn, is now reflected in the line y equals -2 to give shape S. Okay, so again, we've got to look at where y is -2. Well, if we look at, say, this point here, this is x is 2 and y is -2. Or this point here, x is 4, y is -2, -4, -2. So this particular line along here is where y equals -2. So y equals -2. And now we're going to reflect shape R in that line to give shape S. Okay, so we need to do exactly the same again. Again, vertice to vertice is always very, very helpful. So from this point here, 3 jumps. We're going to do 3 jumps the other side. There it is. 3 jumps for that one, 3 jumps the other side, and then 5 jumps, 5 jumps. So that's going to give us now point, I beg your pardon, triangle S, or shape S. Okay, and then it says describe the single rotation that will map shape T to shape S. Okay, well, again, there's a couple of different ways of doing this. I think it's probably the safest option is really to use a bit of tracing paper and kind of work out that what you're doing here is you're rotating this 180 degrees, and hopefully you can see that, particularly if you've done a little bit of revision on this particular topic, you'll be able to see that. But the hardest thing, I think, is to work out the center of rotation. Now, a bit of a trick with it is to actually map these together. Okay, and what you'll find, I'm not doing this particularly well, but what you'll find is that they will actually pass through a particular point. Okay, and that particular point in this case is -1, -2. So if you use a ruler, if it's 180 degrees, you should be able to work out, just using a ruler, or certainly with a bit of tracing paper, where the center of rotation is. So in this particular case, to answer this question, it's 180 degrees rotation. Okay, clockwise around -1, -2. Okay, and now that's usually 2 or 3 marks for this. I'd get 2 marks for that by showing the rotation on the grid as well. Okay, hope that's okay for you. So that's going to be the end of question 7, and we're going to stop here. That's 24 minutes into this particular video. Please do have a go. I hope you've enjoyed the video. Please do add a like or subscribe to the site. I'm going to be putting the rest of this paper on the playlist. And then I've also got paper 2 and paper 3 prepared for you as well. So I'm going to look forward to seeing you inside the next video, where we'll start at question number 8.